Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast. My name is Stuart Teicher. This episode of the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast is sponsored by my latest and hottest CLE program called ChatGPT, Siri, and Alexa are out to get you. If your bar association or law firm is looking for an interesting ethics program about the ethical dangers with using AI, reach out to me. You can go to my website, stuartteicher.com or goodlawyersgonebad.com, go to the Contact Us page and send me a message. They come right to my email, right to my inbox. Today's episode is a little bit different because it's an interview. I spoke with an actual good lawyer gone bad, although I must tell you that I don't like referring to Scott Hughes with that term because while you'll see that he does take full responsibility for his actions, Scott is remorseful for what he's done. He's trying to make amends by telling his story publicly. He hopes that other lawyers will learn from his story and maybe they won't make the same mistakes that he made. Scott ended up assisting in a criminal enterprise that his clients were pursuing, and as you'll hear in this interview, he didn't even realize that he was doing it. But you'll also realize why he should have realized it. I'm calling this interview Inside the Blind Spot. Scott, thank you so much for talking to me. Maybe you can just kind of introduce yourself and then I'll introduce myself and then we can just start talking.
Sure. My name's Scott. I was a lawyer in California since 2007. I was primarily a civil rights attorney. And being a lawyer was my complete identity. I lived it, gave up the weekends, holidays. I wasn't married, didn't have children. I put everything into being an attorney and I loved it.
Where did you go to school? Well, I didn't tell everybody who I am. So I'm Stuart Teicher, and I'm a CLE speaker and a law professor. I teach, I'm an adjunct at Georgetown where I teach professional responsibility. I've been there for now 10 years, and I am I call myself the CLE performer because I know we need to get critical content. I just think it would be a nice idea if we could stay awake in the process. So I try to teach CLE in an entertaining way, and I sit on the ethics board in New Jersey, so I kind of have that full 360-degree view of the system. So where did you go to law school and where are you from? You're saying from California.
Well, I grew up in upstate New York.
What part?
And I grew up in Albany area. And I went to SUNY Albany in undergrad and got a master's in criminology, actually. And then I went to law school in Orange County, California, a small school called Western State. And it was a great school. It was a great area. I knew I wanted to live in Orange County and practice in Orange County. So I figured that would be the best location.
John Wayne Airport, huh?
Exactly.
I was there. I flew in there once for a CLE thing. I made the mistake of driving from LA to Orange County. That was took a long time.
It's painful. It's painful.
So you said you did mostly civil rights work during your practice, right? What does that entail?
Okay, so I started out doing criminal defense and also personal injury. And so I was doing both civil and criminal at the same time. Eventually, they crossed paths. So I came across the case. A very famous lawyer in Orange County referred a case to me involving a police shooting, representing the family of a victim of a police shooting. And so he's like, federal, state, criminal, civil. This case combines all of those things, and I think you could do it. Why don't you give it a shot? And he also mentioned that he went up and down the state of California, and he tried to refer it to, typical civil rights attorneys, and nobody would touch the case because of really complicated facts. And so I really didn't know how to approach it exactly, but this was a kind of a guy you don't say no to.
Yeah.
So,
Did you feel personally that you were kind of like competent to do it? Maybe nervous, but did you feel competent?
I felt that I knew the pieces.
Right.
Just the way he explained, I knew the pieces. I never combined them all together like this before. So there's forensics, there's science, there's trajectory and ballistics, there's firearms, there's police training and tactics, there's criminal defense kind of work involved in it, and there's civil litigation, there's federal civil rights litigation. So there's a lot of pieces that I knew from various cases that I never combined into one case ever before. And so he referred that case to me, and I was enthralled. I went out, sought out the experts in the field, and met with them, saw how they did their cases, although different than mine. I learned from them, and I actually won that case, and I loved it. And so I only wanted to take on those cases like going forward.
Once that happened, you got bit by the bug, huh?
I loved it because it did really combine everything I knew from all these different areas. And I loved being able to put it all together in a way that maybe nobody had seen before. And I thought that was really fulfilling for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. So then did you kind of morph your practice into doing that kind of work?
Exactly. The rest of the matters, it takes years, to resolve some cases. So the rest of the matters were dwindling down. And then by the time, this all came to a crescendo on this other matter that we're going to discuss, I had solely been practicing federal civil rights involving police shooting cases at that point.
Gotcha. So there's another matter that's going on, I'm assuming, kind of parallel to this?
Okay, another lawyer had referred a case to me. There was two gentlemen who were being sued by the SEC. At that point, they had just received subpoenas to go give, testimony before the SEC. It's like a regulatory matter. Usually SEC cases involve licensing and things, people selling securities without a license, something like that. Although I hadn't really done this exact kind of case before, I had done like FINRA matters and then all kinds of other regulatory matters. Like,
so for people who don't know what FINRA is, what's that all about?
So it's like the sister agency of the SEC, and it's financial regulations.
Gotcha. So you've done so you've worked in that world, so to speak. So the SEC stuff wasn't exactly new to you. I mean, this particular type of thing might have been, but working in the securities world wasn't new to you?
It wasn't exactly new. It wasn't my forte. I wasn't doing it every day. But generally, I was doing administrative law across the board. So like any kind of government agencies, because I was doing these civil rights cases, people were saying, oh, Scott deals with the government a lot. Send the case to Scott, and I end up doing a lot of regulatory, administrative law kinds of matters along the way.
It's interesting. It's almost like they were thinking, hey, this guy does something that sort of sounds like that. Send it to him.
Yeah, because it's kind of obscure, and like nobody knows anybody who does anything like that.
Gotcha.
And so a friend of mine who I went to law school with referred this SEC subpoenas to me. And the clients came in and they seemed really nice. I didn't have much, I didn't have any background with them or no connection other than the referral. And what they explained was pretty simple. They received some subpoenas and wanted me to inquire, and their first statement was, we want to cooperate and do whatever they want to do. So that was really positive. And I was, I felt good about it.
So you got a good feeling from the client when you met him for the first time. Did you meet him personally or over the phone?
In person. So we set an in-person meeting, and all three of us were in the same room at the same time. And okay, the other point is they were originally from foreign countries like Latin America, Central America, and they were very nice and kind and polite. Okay, so those two gentlemen were business partners and got subpoenaed by the SEC. And so during the course of that matter, it went on for 3 or 4 years total.
So wait, so they get the subpoenas, and then you say it goes on for 3 or 4 years. So did it turn into something, some charges?
Yeah, so what happens is the first step is there's an investigation. And the subpoenas go out, they subpoena bank records, they subpoena the parties for testimony before the commission.
Mm-hmm.
And then after their investigation, the commission makes a recommendation as to how to resolve it. Ultimately, when they make that recommendation, the party's lawyer can make what's called a Wells submission to make their own proposal as to how that should be resolved. As part of that, what the lawyer is allowed to do is go to the SEC and review everything they have. And so I did that. And I spent a couple of weeks at the SEC in their office in Los Angeles studying everything that they had about my clients. It was my opinion that their position was weak.
The SEC's position?
Yes. That everything that had occurred, if it had occurred at all, was downstream from my clients, and if anybody had promised anything that wasn't delivered, it was so far downstream that they couldn't really connect it to my clients.
Is it possible to talk about the types of charges they were filing without revealing any kind of confidentiality?
Yes, it was selling securities without a license.
Gotcha.
And
you have to be licensed to sell securities. That goes back to the whole Great Depression, right? Started off with the securities, what is it, 1933, 34, and you've got to make all kinds of different disclosures. You got to be licensed also, that we protect the public to make sure. And for people who don't understand it while they're listening to this, and that can include my law students if we play this for them, because I learned after creating exams over the years that there's a lot of things that we as lawyers take for granted that they might not know yet. Difference basically between a private offering of securities where you have a small closedly held business and a public offering is that there's all kinds of different disclosures that you have to make to the public. There's all kinds of different licenses you have to take, or rather obtain, to be able to do that, and the Securities and Exchange Commission governs all of that, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's the perfect way to phrase it. And so ultimately, I made my own proposal to the SEC to resolve it. They went essentially, they split it in the middle somewhere. They settled with us. I felt, my clients felt that the settlement was fair and reasonable and wanted to pay it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what do? They came out with a dollar figure?
Yes, they come up with a dollar figure. It's like fines and penalties.
Right.
And they have to pay an amount of money.
Gotcha.
Okay. So this is where things get interesting. So most people don't know this, but when the federal government subpoenas your banks for records, your banks close your accounts. So if you have a Wells Fargo account or a Bank of America account and the SEC sends a subpoena to them for your records, they will send your records, but they will also find you a high-risk customer, and we don't have the right to a bank account. There's no law, saying that banks have to bank you, and so they will close your account. And so these two gentlemen, at the point where it came to pay the government, I learned, had no bank accounts.
So when you say they close your account, does that mean they freeze it? Do they give you your money back, or they hold on to it?
They freeze it. First thing they do is freeze it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they eventually will give you your money back if there's no lawful means for them to keep it. We did have a bit of a struggle trying to get them to release the funds ultimately to my clients, and they did eventually. But that leaves my clients unbanked.
So logistically, that means I'm not saying, I'm asking. Logistically, once they sought the subpoena, they froze the account. Then when you made the deal, are you saying that because the account was still frozen, they couldn't pay?
Okay, two things. One is SEC sent the subpoenas just for records. The bank on its own, on its own accord, just like pauses the account, makes it no longer usable, and then decides whether to hang on to the funds for some legal reason. And if they don't have any legal reason, they have to release them to the client. But they no longer have to bank the person.
So did
They're
they
now high
release
risk.
the money back to your client?
Ultimately, yes.
But at the
Yeah.
time that they the first was it while you were making your deal with the SEC?
It took longer to get the money back from the bank than to pay the SEC,
Gotcha.
for example. Okay.
So okay, I'll let you keep on going.
Okay. So I that's when I learned that they're essentially unbanked.
Uh huh.
So I talked to the SEC and I'm like, look, you sent out subpoenas. The banks closed their bank accounts. You obviously know that's what happens. How do you want them to pay this? And so they said, well, they could pay you, put it in your trust account, and you could pay us. Here's the link. Let us know when you have it done, and we'll track it.
Uh huh.
And so it sounded fair and reasonable to me. It sounded like a great solution. And so that's what I explained to my clients, and that's exactly what they did. They deposited money to my trust account, and I paid the SEC exactly the same day. Once the funds cleared, I paid it, got the receipts, sent them to the client, sent it to the SEC, waited for verification. Everything was done.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, that matter was closed
Mm-hmm.
right then. Once the money was paid, that was it. The retainers completed, work completed, matter is over. Okay. Then, about a year later, these two gentlemen circle back.
Mm-hmm.
It was not uncommon for my prior clients to come back to me for some other matter. It is pretty common.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a surprise to see or hear from them again. But they came back and they said, hey, we need some help paying some other things. And some of the things that they needed, they would show me invoices. Hey, we need this, we need that. Everything had to be paid like yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
There was some immediacy. There was always a crisis. And it seemed like in the moment that it was just an extension of what I had done with the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously now in hindsight, it was a bad idea. And I was essentially...
Well, what happened?
Okay. So ultimately...
They come to you, they reach out to you, and they say, Scott, we got some more work to do. We got some other people we got to pay. We want you to help us out.
Yes, and it was combined with legal work.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there was hey, we need you to work on this. And also we need to pay this person, here's this contract and we need to fund it, but we don't have the banks and da 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 da. And so
So they brought other legal work to you, like contract work, that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think I see where you're getting at, and it sounds like what you're saying is that it felt as if they were kind of utilizing your services comprehensively. I see. It's not like they just walked into your office and said, "Hey, we got one payment to make. This is where we want you to send it."
Right. That wasn't it. And in fact, let me just jump to the end. I got arrested for money laundering as a result of this. Okay. But coming back to the circle back with my clients, they didn't come in and sit down and say, "Can you help us launder our money?" Okay. That conversation never occurred. There was no, they didn't come in with the purpose of me transferring money on their behalf. They came with legal work, and there was entwined, payments to various vendors and entities that needed to be paid like yesterday, and they were in some kind of bind. And that was secondary to me, to the actual legal work that I was helping them with.
So that may have been their purpose, but they didn't make it apparent to you.
Absolutely correct. And I just felt in the moment I was feeling like I was solving concrete problems and making it easier on them, and just solving this this particular issue. But it turned out I was facilitating money laundering for them.
So how did it end up like, how did you figure it out? I mean, how did it all end up blowing up? They come in, they give you a whole bunch of work, including making these payments, and I assume you're just kind of tackling everything all at once.
That's right. So honestly, I didn't see it at the time for what it was.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't really know until it was too late.
Mm-hmm.
And it took Homeland Security knocking on my door at 5 o'clock in the morning
So tell me a little bit
to
more about
wake
that.
me up.
Expand on that. Where were you?
All right.
It was a weekday.
So here's what happened. Um, there's these payments that needed to be made over the course of like 18 months and a whole bunch of legal work and complicated stuff. I make the payments, I do everything like to the dollar, like perfect accounting, thinking everything's perfectly precise. COVID hits, their business basically stops, and no payments, no transfers. I didn't need to do anything really anymore for them at that point. And so that's like, let's say December, January of 2020, December 2019, January 2020. COVID hits, business basically stops. And so between then and August 18th, 2020, Homeland Security is knocking on my door at 5 a.m. with a warrant for my arrest for a case out of the Southern District of New York involving money laundering, in which I'm a co-conspirator with my two clients and others to launder money on their behalf. And so I get arrested, taken out of bed and arrested. I spent 3 days in custody until I was able to bail out. During the time I was in custody, the federal government seized everything I've ever earned in my whole life. And when I was released, the only balance I had was at an account that they wanted me to withdraw and deposit with the court as bail. And so I had got out of jail, but I had zero. I had open cases. I was in the middle of litigation. The following week, I had a trial. It was a very complicated moment. But that's where I was right at that time.
What did you think when they presented you with that warrant when you were getting arrested that time? Like,
My initial feeling was they're wrong. Like they're wrong, and how could they be so wrong?
interesting.
So what I glossed over is this went on for years. I knew them for the SEC matter, and then they circled back, and then there's another 18 months of involving legal work and payments. During that whole time, we became close, I felt. I trusted them. They knew me, and they knew I loved being a lawyer. They knew it. And they knew I, breathed and slept being a lawyer. So in my mind, even if the government had, was suspecting that right in that moment, I felt almost confident that there's no way that those two clients would put me in that kind of jeopardy. I 100% trusted that they would never do that to me.
When did you find out that it was otherwise? When did you realize?
So one thing I could tell you is I was in jail for 3 days. It doesn't seem like a long time, but it's a very long time. And so I get arrested and I'm put in a cell for 3 days. And I replayed everything they'd ever told me, everything I ever said to them. I replayed it all in my mind in those 3 days. And the one thing that I concluded by the time I got out of jail in those 3 days was I did ask a lot of questions, but I didn't always get all the answers. And I felt that if what the government was saying was true, that I didn't do enough to inquire or to dig the way that I would normally do in any case that I do. In these civil rights cases, in any kind of case that I do, I dig to the bottom and get to the ground truth. And, I never, after replaying, I remember asking lots of questions of them and like trying to get to the bottom of things. And it dawned on me that I actually never, I never fully got to the bottom of everything with them.
Why?
And I felt, what's that?
Why? Why do you think you never, when you asked those questions and he didn't answer, why didn't you continue to press them?
Probably two things. One is I trusted them. So I think I got too close to them and I didn't maintain the boundary that we should have as lawyers with clients. The other is that I stayed focused on the immediate legal work and the concrete problems in front of me instead of stepping back and asking the harder questions I should have been asking all along. Now, I'm not deflecting blame in any way. It was completely my fault. I fully accept responsibility for my actions and inactions. Whether or not I understood the legal significance at the time, the professional failure was mine. I should have stopped, investigated further, and refused to let my trust account become a substitute for a client's banking problem. If there had been the right kind of professional barrier there, I wouldn't have accepted anything less than the ground truth.
So what did they end up what were they doing? And if you can, again, without revealing confidentiality, but what were they doing that you had assisted them in?
Okay, so their business involved Bitcoin. So it involved Bitcoin outside of America. So most of their work was like foreign.
Mm.
So there was another way that I couldn't really reach the source truth, you know? And the other thing that I can add is this was so far outside of my normal practice that I shouldn't have been dealing with. The one thing I learned, thinking back about when I first got into civil rights and I sought out experts in the field in civil rights before I really tackled my case, I didn't really do that in this circumstance. And one thing I did learn is about cognitive bias, and that to think that, hey, if you're successful in one area, that you can automatically be successful in other areas. And that's wrong. And that comes back to just basic competency under the rules. And I do feel that we can mentally trick ourselves into believing that we're more competent than we are in other things when we show some success in other areas.
It's so funny that you say that because I'm doing a program right now called Psychobabble in Attorney Ethics. And that's I'm telling you, I was just writing it this morning, and that's one of the things that I saw. What was it? The Dunning-Kruger effect? Oh my God,
Yeah.
I can't believe, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm botching.
Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah. Dunning-Kruger, right. And I think part of that they were saying was exactly what you just said, which is when you have a certain level of expertise in one area, you think that it's transferable to other areas, and then you learn later that it's not.
And that's the core of the competency rules.
Yeah.
And we don't really explain it that way, I don't think, in the law. And it really should be explained that way because, anybody could go learn anything, but this kind of thing, something that's so foreign to your normal everyday practice, you really got to seek out the experts. And the one thing I found is I applied those techniques to civil rights and to other particular areas. I hired experts that would teach me this or that subject matter that I needed. And I would find the best person in America who does this and learn that. When it came to these two clients and their subject matter, I didn't do it. I kept thinking that I had a handle on it and that I could understand it. And I feel that had I sought out expertise on the subject, it would have stopped me.
So when you found out ultimately were your clients just flat out criminals?
That's that's exactly it.
Hmm. They were engaging in criminal activity and then just using you to be. So what most people don't understand about money laundering, and you correct me if I'm wrong, on this, but I did a little bit of research on it for some other cases, is that you don't really clean money and make dirty money, ill-gotten gains, legitimate. What you do is you find ways to be able to put it into the system so that it appears legitimate on the other end, and or that people can't necessarily follow the trail to where the original crime occurred, so that so that it appears to be legitimate. They take money that was ill-gotten gains and find a way to place it back into the system so that they can ultimately use it in some way and make it appear legitimate. But if you follow the trail in every money laundering case, you'll ultimately see that the source is a criminal source.
That's absolutely correct. And one thing I would point out is what better source would be a lawyer's trust account?
Right.
To trace it back to there, and then it just looks clean for them.
So did you ever find out what type of crimes they were engaging in, or just that it was just crimes and they were using you to funnel it back into the system?
Okay, the government described it as a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, yeah, and the Ponzi schemes, the pyramid schemes. They call it a Ponzi scheme because it's named after the first guy to do it. This guy's name was Ponzi, and it's like a Bernie Madoff kind of scheme, that sort of thing where you take money from investors, and I'm not saying this is exactly what they did, but generally for people who are listening, you take money from investors, and instead of investing it in a legitimate business, you put it in your pocket and you use what you have left over to pay the interest to people, and then you continue to fund that scheme by taking more money from other investors, and you just continue to steal the money and then keep some of it to pay interest to people. And ultimately what some people think is, well, how do you eventually get out of it? And the answer is you don't. It's a crime, you steal it, and eventually pyramid schemes fall down.
Exactly. And you know what? COVID happened right at that moment, and that's what caused the collapse.
That I see. So they were actively engaging in whatever fake business, but once COVID hit, whatever their underlying business and their underlying scheme was collapsed because COVID stopped them from doing it, and they could no longer take more money to be able to support this Ponzi scheme.
Absolutely, that's correct.
And that's when everything collapsed. Someone must have gone to the police and said, hey, these guys are a bunch of crooks, and one thing led to another. And that's why. So if COVID hit in, say, March, end of February, beginning of March, you get a knock on your door in August.
Exactly. And the other thing is, COVID was hitting in other countries before here. And so everything they were doing was foreign. So, in fact, COVID affected them earlier than it actually affected, the United States.
So the money was coming in from overseas, going through your trust account, and then you were paying it out to domestic individuals?
Domestic and foreign, correct.
Domestic
Not
and
just
foreign.
individuals, entities, there was real invoices, real things, it wasn't, necessarily.
They were real invoices as far as you could tell, but were they actually real invoices? Or were they manufactured to appear real?
Looking back, there's probably a mix of both.
Yeah. Which is what they do. They do some legitimate business and some illegitimate business in order to throw the trail off.
Exactly.
Yeah. What fascinated me the most, first of all, I can't thank you enough for talking about this, because it's got to be, it takes a lot of bravery to admit, that what you did was wrong, and they got caught up in this kind of stuff. So thank you. What's amazing to me is, I've been telling people in all my CLE programs and to all of my students for years that there's no soundtrack in real life. When you go to a movie and something bad is going to happen, the strings build up and the lighting changes and it builds to a crescendo, and then ba-dun, ba-dun, and then bam, the bad thing happens. But there's no soundtrack in real life, and it seems as if in your case that's exactly one of the things that happened.
It was the exact opposite of that evil moment.
What was the exact opposite of the evil moment?
Yes, there was never that evil moment that just said, hey, we're going to use your trust account that's under your law firm's name, that's reported to the state of California, has your social security number, has your tax ID number, and we're going to use that to launder foreign money into the United States and abroad to do, to harm people.
That would have been the soundtrack.
Yes. And there was never that moment. It was more, everything was loving, kind, friendly, problem solving. None of those, there was never that soundtrack moment, of doom. And really, even until the police knocked on the door, I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah, really. Even if it's, that's amazing. That's amazing. And what you talked about having that boundary, one of the phrases I always tell people that one of my favorite phrases in the ethics world really comes from the professionalism world. I think it's Ohio and Georgia and a couple of other jurisdictions. In their professionalism documents, they talk about how we as lawyers need to have a sympathetic detachment with the client. And I love that phrase because it acknowledges the reality and something that you mentioned, which is we have relationships with our clients and we're gonna have relationship with our clients, but that sense of detachment that's necessary is equally important. And you talked about how you didn't have that, and it really hurt you.
It was the exact opposite of that. It wasn't detachment, it was attachment and codependency.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just being sympathetic, like I genuinely wanted to help them and solve their problems.
Go ahead.
To my own detriment, by the way, to my own detriment.
What percentage of your revenue from your practice was coming from that client?
Okay, I can tell you the number.
Yeah, I'm not trying to pry into the actual numbers. I just wanted to know percentage wise.
Probably more than 25% during that time period.
25%. And that's a big chunk, right?
It was a big chunk. It wasn't small, it wasn't all of it, but it was a good chunk, and I relied on it.
Yeah, you relied on it, right? That's what it is. Like people, if someone were to say, "Oh, it's only 25%." No, that's a big number. That's a fourth of your practice.
That's right. So, to think about where my attention was spent, it was spent on a majority in litigation, but there was this very important 25% over here on the side that I did have to pay attention to. And so I would say, I could have overlooked things as a result of having that nice cushion.
Maybe not consciously.
Correct.
Right. Just that, there's something inside your head that says these guys are paying me some good money and I should just keep on doing what I'm doing and not ask too many questions. And like, again, not consciously, but something inside your head may have been saying, you know what, like maybe there was something in your head hearing a tiny little bit of the music from the soundtrack. And if it did, the rest of your mind just told it to shut up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
That's why that boundary is so critical.
So they arrested you, you were in jail, you got out, they charged you, and did you plead? What happened?
Okay, so I kept thinking we're going to get to the bottom of this. And one of the things I did was I got every text message, every email from the government, and I read everything. Like, what is in here? What did they tell me? What did I say? What did they say?
You got it from the government. They provided it to you in discovery.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was looking for that, hey, can you launder this for us or something like that I missed, But it's never in there. It was never in there. There was never anything like that. It was just, it confirmed what I concluded when I was in custody was I never got to the bottom of it, things that they said, we'll give it to you tomorrow, we'll send it next week, I never followed up on. And I let it go. And I was just on to the next thing all the time. And that was my mistake. And that's what really popped out to me from the evidence was I just didn't do enough diligence.
And then when they presented all that to you, what did you end up doing? Did you plead?
Okay, so then I made a deal and I pled guilty to money laundering. Uh, and there was no deal on sentencing, so the federal government doesn't do that. You plead to the count, and the judge sentences you.
So what do you mean by that for people who aren't familiar with it?
Okay, so under the federal sentencing guidelines, if you when you plead guilty, you don't agree up front to what your sentence will be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You plead guilty to a count, and then based on the guidelines, there's a range of potential sentences, and then the government, the prosecutors present what they think you should get within those guidelines, and you present what you think you should get, and then the judge ultimately decides on his or her own.
Did you have a lawyer representing you, or did you represent yourself?
I I had an appointed lawyer, so a lawyer who was appointed by the court because the government had taken all of my funds.
Right.
So I qualified for an appointed attorney, and I was represented.
Okay. Were you happy
And
with that representation?
ultimately, yes, I think I think he did everything he could do.
Okay. Okay, so I cut you off. So you pled guilty and you
So
were
I
talking
pled
about sentencing.
guilty and went to sentencing. The judge sentenced me to 18 months in federal prison, 3 years of probation. I had to forfeit all of my assets.
Mm.
So everything that I'd ever earned in my whole life is now the government's. And I'm on probation right now. So I've completed the custodial term
You went to
of my
jail?
sentence. So I went to federal prison, and I was lowest custody, so I was like a minimum custody because it's a nonviolent crime and no criminal history. And so I went to a federal prison camp in Arizona, and from February to about June, and then I was released to a halfway house in the Bronx and spent about 6 months at the halfway house in the Bronx, and then was home on house arrest for another 60 days, and then on probation since December of 2025.
Mm.
So a little over a year and 4 months. And the earliest I can apply to terminate probation early would be around the 18-month mark, so sometime this summer.
Mm. Hmm. How did your family handle it?
Okay, I mean, everybody was in shock, obviously. Okay, the one point I want to make is I was the guy that everybody would call if they were in the situation.
Yeah.
If they were in any kind of ethical quandary, everybody would call me. And so this was an absolute shock to everybody who knows me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody would believe it. And it was a tragedy.
Yeah.
It was a tragedy for me and my career and everybody around me.
Yeah. Oh, unbelievable. So now what?
Okay, so the earliest I can reapply to the bar is around October 2028. I have to take the bar exam again, and then the bar itself
That
has
might
to,
be more punishment than going to jail.
you know, the losing my losing my license hurt me the most.
Yeah.
That broke my heart. I don't. This wasn't just a job I chose to do. Like, to me, this was my calling. I was put here to be a lawyer, and I feel even though this situation was very terrible, I learned an invaluable lesson here. I learned a lot of lessons, and I think it's going to make me a better lawyer going forward. And I hope I can come back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're going to make application when you said 2028?
Yes, sir. I got to take the bar again and make an application and try to prove that I've been rehabilitated.
Mm-hmm. Where do you want to practice? Are you still in California?
Well, right now I'm in Manhattan, but yes, I would like to get my license back in California first.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So if you had to leave any sort of lessons? I mean, you've provided a tremendous amount of lessons so far. I mean, honestly, it's incredible the guidance that I think you've imparted just in this conversation. But if there's anything in particular you'd want to say, for instance, to some law students, what would that be? And the reason I say law students in particular is because I think a lot of lawyers can empathize because they're out there dealing with clients. But I wonder, what you can say to the law students who haven't been in the practice yet and almost have a difficult time appreciating some of the stuff that you're talking about.
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is, I don't tell a story because I'm blameless. In fact, it's the exact opposite. A lawyer can stop this from happening. Mm-hmm. There's rules. And even if you try to follow the rules like to the closest way possible, you can still violate them in this way. So one of the most important things is that anytime you find drift from the rules, like, hey, I'm getting too close, or hey, there's this situation that's outside the norm. If something is unusual, you got to have mentors and you got to be able to talk about what you're doing with others. Don't think that you have to solve all of the problems yourself. And I think if we can do that, I think running it by a group of other lawyers, people senior to you, even hiring ethics counsel. So I don't know if you do consulting, but there's a lot of law professors that do consulting that lawyers can hire and talk to at any time. Hey, this is a situation. And you bounce it off a neutral third party who's well-versed in the rules, and particularly various states and how all kinds of various situations. That alone is so invaluable because we have, as a practicing litigator, we haven't seen everything.
Yeah, and there's an organization that I am not a part of, and I have no, I'm not trying to give them a commercial or anything, but the Association for Professional Responsibility Lawyers is where I send a lot of people who want to get opinions on how to behave in accordance with the rules. Their website is april.net, like the month of April, just no I, april.net, aprl.net. And that's a place where you can go, and they've got like a find a member tab, which is basically like a referral service. You click that and you can find a member in the area of law that you're looking for and in the jurisdiction that you're looking for. And those are usually lawyers who are very well versed in these kinds of issues.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea. I wish I knew about that, and I wish I was doing that on a regular basis with my matters and running it by neutral ethics counsel.
Interesting idea about doing it on a regular basis. Doing it not just when you get into trouble, but just almost as if it were a periodic check to say, hey, let's talk about like my cases. Tell me if you think I'm doing anything wrong.
100%. It's just like, checking in with your doctor.
Yeah. A wellness check.
Exactly. Like an ethics check.
Really
I think that's really important. Being able to talk, if you can articulate what's going on and you actually say it out loud to somebody else who's well versed in ethics, you can probably, if I had explained this out loud to somebody and just been saying the words myself, it might have rung to me what I
maybe
was
that doing. Soundtrack would have started.
Exactly.
Once you heard yourself saying it, and if not, then maybe saying it to somebody else, they would have said, wait a minute, are you
100%
sure this is okay?
Yeah. I think it could have been identified.
Wow. Interesting. Well, great stuff. Well, I'm glad that you're on the ascent out of the difficulty.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me tell the story. I think it's really important.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. I hope you found the program valuable. It was an interesting interview, don't you think? Please make sure that you like and subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcast platform you listen to. It really does help us get noticed by other people. Thanks very much for listening. And Haley and Ross, please make sure you drive careful.